Welcome everyone. This is our third webinar in the series of 4. You can register for the final webinar as well as follow Hermione across the Atlantic and see the weather data being uploaded daily from her voyage 2015 at seaformation.com. That's SEA formation.com. Today we will be talking about life aboard. How did sailors live in the late 18th century and what has changed today that makes it easier and less dangerous? For those who are hearing about the ship for the first time, we invite you to check out our website, seaformation.com, where we explain it in more detail. You are about to board a full-scale, authentic replica of the original Hermione. The original was built in 1779 to carry the Marquis de Lafayette with the news of King Louis XVI's support of the colonies. Today, Hermione is heading to the United States in celebration of Franco-American friendship, which, it can be argued, started with Lafayette and Washington. One of Lafayette's mottos is "Que non?", meaning why not? And indeed, why not use this incredible story of defying the odds and building this ship to launch a new way of thinking about learning? These webinars are designed to start the conversations that can be had between classrooms on both sides of the pond, as we sometimes refer to the Atlantic. We encourage you to continue to investigate and learn through our website. If you do, please take a minute to leave us your contact info, and we will publish a list of participating schools so that a shared curriculum might be created for the next school year. Okay, on with today's presentation. With us today, we have Bert Rogers, Executive Director of Tall Ships America in Newport, Rhode Island. Thank you for joining us, Bert.
Happy to be here.
And we also have Emil Bladh, one of the quartermasters aboard Hermione, who is joining us from Sweden. Thank you for being here, Emil.
Yeah, thank you.
Emil, before we move on, I've been asked by my father to inquire how he did during his first leg.
Yeah, he was doing great.
Good to know. I look forward to seeing him in Yorktown.
Yeah. If he survives. No. He will be fine.
He's a hardened old man.
Yeah, exactly. And a good worker.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So, because of the organization of the sailors aboard, it is easier to explain with a chart. And let's take a quick look at something that my father has presented to schools in New York, which help them understand how a sailor's day is broken down. We can divide the crew aboard Hermione into 3 watches of 18 sailors. There are 20 on the port watch, there are 20 on the starboard watch, and 22 at midship watch. This gives us a total of 62 crew. Along with the 62 crew, we add a doctor, an engineer, a carpenter, a bosun, a sailmaker, 2 cooks and a messmate, a superintendent in charge of communications, 2 watch lieutenants, and a first lieutenant who also handles one of the watches, giving us 3 watch lieutenants aboard. Of course, there's the commander or captain, who, along with 12 other people, brings us to 74 people in total to navigate the ship. The day is split into 4-hour segments, which create a total of 6 segments a day. You can see how they break down here. We use colors to attribute the segments to the watch, which is the group of sailors that will work that part of the day. Red for port, green for starboard, and blue for midship. So, for example, port will work from 8 to 12 noon, and again from 8 p.m. to 12 midnight. After each work quarter, known as a watch, the crew that worked goes into standby mode for 4 hours, during which they're on call and might have to return to work. They then have 4 hours to rest. After resting, the cycle begins again. To keep time aboard, we use a bell centered on the top deck of the ship. It is rung once after the first 30 minutes of the 4-hour watch, then twice after the first hour, 3 times after 90 minutes, and so on, increasing every 30 minutes by 1 until we get to 8 bells at the end of the 4 hours. Many of you may know the 8 bells and all is well saying from the movies. Now you know that it means it is time for the crew to switch to the next watch. Before we start answering your questions that have already been coming in from our website, seaformation.com, and on Twitter at @C__formation, Let's watch this short video describing today's topic.
Hey everybody, welcome aboard. This is our third webinar. Will be about life aboard, and we're going to tell you a little bit about what sailors do on the ship. So we're in the starboard side. The crew on the ship is divided into three sections, which you've heard about: port, starboard, and midship. And in this space, 18 sailors share hammocks or bunks, depending on your allocation. And as you can tell, we use the space. We use every square inch of space. So the crew in the quarters here share the space, and everyone keeps a sort of link to home, either by books, keep their journals, like this person next to me has, or as I do, I have a small book that was offered to me by a friend of pictures of family and people that I miss and I think about. So I have right above my head. And little souvenir cards, things like that. It's just kind of fun to have available. Other people like to have music that's available to them to kind of go into their zone from time to time because it's tight space. But we also have to put away our gear, and that is either hung judiciously from different places or follow me underneath the hammocks. We each get a box, and everything we bring aboard has got to fit in this box. So coming out of the quarters, this is the space we use, obviously, to keep hygiene foremost in our minds. And we have showers, toilets, and sinks. One of the modern additions to the ship that make us all very, very happy, because in the 18th century, they didn't have this luxury. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, the women and men on board the ship share this space. They sleep in quarters together, and they make every attempt to be helpful to one another. The days take on a rhythm of their own, sometimes feeling like 2 days in one.
Chicken check. Faudrait reprendre la cargue-point là. 1, 2. Nul. 1, 2. Ok. 2. Allez. Reste à plus de fois. Simple, c'est ça, ouais, voilà. Il y a qui vont prendre. Oui, on n'est pas tous les. 12, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
After the work, the sailors do find time to make music, to sew, to read, to write, or simply reflect.
surveillant toute télé. Tout ça, on repart retrouver quand on en est marre.
So that concludes our unit on life aboard. This is the space right above the area where we sleep, the full home where we sleep. This is called the battery.
Sorry about that, everyone. Back to the video.
The battery. There are cannons on the ship, on this part of the ship. There are also, this is where we eat. The wall behind me, you can see all the personalized cups that the Gabiers have to have their very important cup of coffee to keep awake at night. And it's a great space to say goodbye. And stay tuned to our next webinar on propulsion.
All right, Emil and Bert, you're back with us now.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So let's go on to the questions, and as soon as the ship dials in, which I believe will be in 5 to 10 minutes, hopefully, we will direct our attention to them and see how they're doing.
Sounds like a good plan.
All right, our first question is from Sam. They would like to know if the same crew works the whole voyage or if there are rotations.
It's normally rotation. If you're in the permanent crew, for this voyage on Hermione, they actually work throughout the whole voyage, so 5 months in total. But the volunteer, they change after 1.5 or 2 months. There is a new volunteer crew coming on board.
So that means it was the same group that went from Rochefort to the Canaries, and then from the Canaries to the U.S.?
Yeah, there was a small change of I think it was 10 people changing in the Canaries. But then as soon as the crossing is done, I think there is more or less the whole volunteer crew who's being changed.
Our next question is from Axel in Rochefort. They wonder if the original Hermione had bunks for the crew or if they used a hammock setup like is used right now, and how many crew did the original ship have aboard?
The original, they only used hammocks or sleeping directly on deck, I would say, and then they were at least the double the amount of crew, but they could also be up to 300 on a ship like this. So quite a lot more people.
Yeah, substantially.
Yeah.
We have a question here. Is the bell used for anything other than keeping time and watch changes?
It was also used for anchoring, for example. You could you had a bell system when anchoring and telling how many cables you had on the rope or on the chain you had in water. So you could strike one bell and then talk with each other. You had a small bell in the front and a bigger in the aft, talking with each other back and forth when it's really windy, but mainly to keep track on time.
So that's very
Fog
when you're anchored.
Sorry, what was that?
If it is foggy,
you're
you're required to strike the bell to announce your presence in the fog. It's a traditional and fog signal. It's part of the rules of the road.
Oh, I have really problem to hear what you're saying. It's some kind of echo.
Yeah, I think Bert, it might help if you turn down the volume on your computer a bit. We're hearing you twice.
Okay. Is this better?
Still a slight echo, but there's enough delay for me. I can figure out what you're saying. You're talking about how in fog they'll use the bell to communicate their position. Is that correct?
Yes, when the ship is anchored.
Yeah, that might very well be as well that they're using it to signal in foggy condition to tell their position and before they had a mist or something like that. Yeah.
Our next question comes from Claire. Claire asks, how the crew work out going ashore when they are in port? And is the ship ever without any crew aboard?
No, it's always one watch who is on watch, who's taking care of the gangway, being on, keeping a lookout on the gangway, and being on board the ship as well. So there's always at least 20 persons on board when we're alongside. Mainly to take care of the gangway, but also if there is something happening with the ship, you need to do something with the mooring lines or with the sails, or if the wind are changing or whatever. So there's always at least one watcher on board.
Okay. Elias wonders how the meals are handled on board, and when the crew eats, who sails the ship, and if you could address that.
It's the same. It's we always eat in two shifts. So there's two breakfasts, two lunch, and two dinner. So for example, the port watcher who is on watch 8 to 12, they eat between 12 and 1, and starboard who is going on watch, they eat from 11 to 12, and then so there's one sitting at 11 to 12 and one 12 to 1, and then there's one dinner at 7 to 8, and then one 8 to 9. So it's before or after watch you do the eating.
And what is the food like on board now versus what it was back in the 18th century?
I hope it's better. No, I would say it's way better because of the system with the modern system with fridges and freezers, and the techniques that we have today with mainly with the storage. We can store food and keep it fresh for a longer period of time. So back in the days, I guess they were drying the meat, and they had pretty basic food, and always sort of the same dry meat, or they were luckily they could get some fish and prepare that maybe. Rumors said that they were baking bread, and then the bread was filled up with worms. So they were always needed to knock the bread on the table before they eat it, to empty it of worms before they could eat it, and then have beer or some other alcohol beverage to dip it into, soften it up to make it easier to eat.
Yeah, hopefully conditions are better now.
Yeah, much better, I would say. And we also have water makers, so we can produce our own water. So we're never out of fresh water, which is also quite a lot better than back in the days.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Nutrition used to be a major issue.
Yeah.
And scurvy was a nutrition-based disease that caused a lot of problems in sailing ships that voyage long distances.
And speaking of scurvy and other nutrition-based ailments, was there one main way for them to address those issues, or?
Well, the issue was always fresh foods, and especially fruits and vegetables. And the discovery that citrus fruits provided vitamin C, which they didn't know what vitamin C was, but they knew that citrus fruits would hold off scurvy. Scurvy is actually a deficiency of vitamin C. And in British ships, they got the sailors to drink lime juice by putting it in their rum, which they called grog, and that's why British sailors were known as liners. I'm not sure if that was the case in French ships.
So, I'll mute him for a second. That noise is the ship figuring out its setup to talk with us. I'll give them a few seconds to organize themselves, and then we'll go over to them. I think they were just messing around with their equipment.
Okay.
But I'm glad they were able to connect with us. Let's see how they're doing. Mark, can you hear me? Mark, are you there? Here. No, no, you're fine. Are you able to speak?
Hear the ship.
All right. It sounds like the ship is rolling a good deal, or at least settling a bit. I'll talk to him in the chat, and I'll see if we can get him on audio. For right now, let's move on to a question that's come in from our attendees. I'm asked, how many women are on board right now?
I would say about 25, 30 or something like that in total. So it's a majority of guys, but we always try to even out the crew as much as possible, at least on the voluntary side, to make it sort of 50-50 or as close to 50-50 as possible.
And the quarters are shared, right? And all the work that they do is the same. Everyone's sharing responsibility.
Yeah, everybody is doing everything.
That is typical in modern sail training vessels. Completely co-educational crew, women and men sharing the duties, sharing the spaces, and it's not a problem. Everybody approaches it with respect and good community behavior.
So it sounds like if the individual, no matter gender, nationality, what have you, if they're willing to put in the work and do what it takes to be a member of the crew, then they're welcomed with open arms.
Yeah, basically like that. The only thing they need to be able to swim in case they fall in the water.
Right.
Yeah. But other than that, there is no limits. Or 18 years old and then good to go.
So Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Wonderful. All right. Well, don't let me interrupt the cycle of questions. I'll jump in if everyone else wants me to.
Okay. Any quick update from the ship?
Sure. We are presently in a northerly wind, just a little bit east of north, and we're able to, with the sails fully braced, point into it and make pretty close to west. Sometimes a little bit with a bit of a drift. We're running just shy of west, which we know if we keep on doing this, we'll end up in San Juan, Puerto Rico, as opposed to where we want to be. But we're making between 7 and 8 knots, so we are getting across the ocean very quickly, and hopefully the winds will back a little more as we get across, and we'll be able to head further north of west.
Wonderful. So along what we were talking with before, someone has asked if the crew needs special training. Emil, you mentioned that they need to be able to swim and that they go through a tryout period. Is there anything additional to that?
No, they go through a training session, or they did as long as we were in Rochefort. They made a training session for 3 days, learning the basic practically and theoretically, and then the rest is basically learning by doing on board. You get to know everything, and me after nearly 10 years, I still learn new stuff every day. So you can never be fully learned sailing on a ship like this.
Mm-hmm. Always learning.
Yeah.
That's why it's an adventure.
I will say from the ship here. Yeah, it is.
We have a question from Mason in Brooklyn. Mason asks, if the bell is wrong, will everyone be off time for the rest of the trip, or is there a way to reset?
There is a way to reset, and then everybody always keep track on when the watch changes after 4 hours. So then you can reset the time and start all over again with striking one bell from the beginning of the watch. Because no matter how many bells there is, there's always people keeping track on when you're going off watch.
People don't want to be late for the start.
Ben, along those lines, we're about to go through a time zone shift here, and we're going to lose an hour, or actually we have to add an hour to our workday come tomorrow. So each watch will add 20 minutes to their work watch. So instead of working a 4-hour watch, we will all each work a 4-hour, 20-minute watch.
Okay. Bert, was there something you wanted to add?
Only that people take their time for being relieved from watch very seriously. And so if someone was late to strike the bell, they'd hear about it promptly.
That's a very good point, that those 4-hour shifts become a very strong part of the life on board, and you don't want to miss a minute of your time at rest. And then, as you said, people would be very conscientious of whether or not they're overdoing their time.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got a lot of questions coming in, which is great to see. Have any storms been encountered yet? And how does that affect life on board?
We haven't had that many big storms on Hermione yet. I guess they will come as the voyage continues. There will be some weathers, but we had quite some wind during the sea trials last year, and the way it affects it, everything is moving way more, and you have to be more careful and more alert on what you're doing, and way more careful as well with everything, since everything is moving around, and you need to make sure that everything is lashed down and can't be flying around, sort of.
So just make the work a bit more dangerous for everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Along those lines, we've paid attention to the tropical storm that formed off the U.S. coast. I guess it was May 7th, and we're highly vigilant as we approach that area to make sure that nothing else forms in our way.
Our next question is, do any people on board have more work than others? And that's from Leonard in Brooklyn.
I think everybody do more or less the same work. It would be the bosun. He's always busy. Bosun, carpenter, and sailmaker, since they work goes in a day rhythm. Then they're not part of the watch system. So they work from 8 to 6 or 8 till 8. Depending on how much they have to do. So they work slightly more hours, but if it's nice and calm, then they also have the possibility to take some time off.
Okay.
In my experience in sailing, the hardest working people on board the ship are in the galley department and the chief mate, the second in command. The captain relies on that second in command person so heavily that their job is very demanding.
Can you explain a bit more what that second in command has under their responsibilities?
Well, generally speaking, they run a watch group, so they're an officer in charge of navigation for a watch, and that's 4 hours twice a day right there. Plus, additionally, they will be in charge of seeing that all of the rest of the business of the ship is well at hand. They will be giving instructions to the bosun to the sailmaker, and they will be interacting with the engineer about the status of things in the machinery department. They will be just supporting the captain in everything that he or she requires, and it's a big responsibility. It's also excellent training because a chief officer is sort of a captain in training, and they will become captain in their own right after they have more time and more experience. So the trials and experience that they get underway as chief officer are extremely important for their own training.
That's a lot of responsibility and a great training potential for them to then move up. It sounds like.
Indeed, that's the tradition of the sea, is that you work your way up the chain of command by experiencing it at lower levels and learning the skills and acquiring the experience and the wisdom that you need to succeed at the next level. So it's kind of an ancient tradition, and it works very well.
Relating to the hierarchy of a ship, you get better accommodations depending on your rank. This is asked by Julian from Brooklyn.
Well, all the permanent crew or the professional crew, they more or less everybody have their own cabin. So that is of course a little bit better than to sleep in the quarters where, as Mark showed us in the video, you do have your own private space, and so somewhat more luxury, yes, for permanent crew.
Our next question is in regard to gender equality. How has gender equality changed on the ship since when the Hermione was first sailing? And what is it like now? That's from Maya in Brooklyn.
A lot, I would say. Today we do allow girls to come on board and sail, and before I think it was only seaman's life was seen as a guy thing to do, and it was only allowed. I think it was even bad luck to have women on board. So I think it changed a lot.
Yeah, and Ben, I can just add that from the experience of working with the women on board this ship, they really are a testament to the fact that men and women can work together, and they all do exactly the same jobs. The same work is expected of them in terms of climbing and the rigging and hauling the lines and furling the sails, and it really makes for a wonderful community of people helping each other to learn.
And I would just add that in the American tall ship fleet, there are very many female captains and officers and other ranking managers in the system. It's complete equality. It's more opportunity for each other.
Yeah, Bert, that's a really good point. On board the Emil, two of the officers out of the 4 are women, so that holds true here too.
Our next question is in regard to the cannons that can be seen on the Hermione. Does it have all 26 guns, and do you get to practice using them? Are there hazards involved? That's from Doris Ray.
We do have 24 guns, I think. I think we removed 2 of the supposed to be guns. There was 26, but we removed 2 because of lack of space and not really handy to have the last ones on board. But the rest we have on board, and we normally use them every time we come in and we leave a port to salute the country that we come to, or the port that we come to. And normally it's not that dangerous to do it because we use electrical fuse, so it's only a load of gunpowder, and then you fire them via an electrical technique. So there's never, as it was historically.
And they're just blanks, so there's no projectile firing out. It's all smoke from the gunpowder.
Yeah, exactly. It's only a lot of smoke and a lot of sound, but nothing coming out. more than that.
Our next question from Robert Mills: was the north-northeast wind expected? And how do changing weather patterns like that affect your voyage?
I think that's up to Mark, since he's on board.
The winds that we've been experiencing are further south than we expected them to be. When we left the Canary Islands, we were hoping to go due west, and we in fact had to run almost a day, actually over a day, south in order to pick up the prevailing winds to cross. So it's a little bit out of the norm, which actually ties into the fact that we had this tropical storm established in May 7th, which is almost an entire month earlier than is normally expected. So the models are not holding up. What we're finding is that the winds that we're experiencing locally are very different from what is actually even being reported to the individuals planning our route back on land. So there's a disconnect between what's being seen through the satellites and what's actually happening on the ground. But we're making do with it. We're reading just a day in advance and adjusting our course to avoid any heavy weather if we can, while still staying on the course we need.
This is an interesting question to me as far as rescue procedure goes. Has anyone ever fallen off the boat, and how would you get them back? That's from August in Brooklyn.
Luckily, we haven't had any men overboard so far on Hermione, and I do not think we will have. But if it happens, then we have a small Zodiac or a rubber dinghy in the middle of the ship, which we can hoist it and launch it by a boom that we maneuver by hand as we maneuver all the sails and everything. So we lift up the boom, and then we can hoist the dinghy and lower it. And we also have a lot of rafts and life rings and satellite radars that can spot the position. And I think the system to rescue someone falling overboard is pretty well organized. Knock on wood and take on wood that it won't happen, but if it happens, there is a procedure for it.
I would just like to add that is one of those serious and scary risks that captains and officers concern themselves with. And one of the ways that they prevent it from happening is making sure that their crew, everybody in the crew, everybody on board the ship, is properly trained and knows how to move about the deck of the ship so in such a way that they're not likely to fall overboard in the first place. The best way to prevent an accident or to avoid the consequences of an accident is to prevent it from happening. And so a lot of training is done to make sure that people do not take risks near the edges of the ship in such a way that they would be falling overboard. Even so, it does sometimes happen, and so then, of course, as Emil said, the ship's company has to be trained in how to rescue a person once they do go overboard, and they spend a lot of time drilling. A drill is a practice maneuver. They practice rescuing someone overboard who's not a real person. They would throw something like a life ring over, and then do a drill and practice bringing that life ring back aboard. And they do that on a regular basis so that in the event that such an accident would happen, everybody knows what to do with a minimum of fuss and confusion, and they can rescue the person as quickly as possible. In high latitude sailing where the water is cold, it's really critical to get that person quickly. In lower latitude sailing where the water is warmer, you have a little bit more time. But it's a very serious issue, and the professional seamen take it very seriously.
Right. Gentlemen, I'm going to just chime in on that note of safety and falling over the board, and what Bert said is absolutely true. Last night we had 10 to 15 foot seas with an occasional roller that came broadside, and individuals were given the choice of whether to go up on the bowsprit if they felt secure enough doing so for their watch, or staying on the deck and just peeking under the spritsail, as we rolled up and down in the seas. Because if you're not confident climbing, the first thing you can do is go out there and actually climb, especially in the dark. This was between midnight and 4 when we were on. On another note, because I'm going to have to sign off, given the cost of our communications, I wanted to share one thing that has to do with life aboard that's kind of fun, and it evolved almost organically from within this crew, and that is when we change watches, the group of individuals going off to rest welcome those who are about to come on to watch by singing them a song, and we sometimes take some oldies from the 50s or we actually make songs up, and Emil, you'd be happy to know that it's become quite orchestral now. We've got guitars, and I don't doubt that the saxophone on board is going to be used very soon for one of these. But it lightens the load a little bit, especially for the midnight and the 4 o'clock shifts, the changes. Everyone gets a good laugh in, and remembers that we're all in this together, even if there's one group coming on to work and one group going to bed. So. With that, unless there's a question, Ben, that you feel has to be answered from the ship, I think I would probably sign off and leave it to you experts to continue.
There are a couple related to the ship. The one I'm looking at right now comes from Theo in Brooklyn. They ask, what is the most common entertainment in the 8 hours of break that you have?
During the breaks, it's probably the predominant one is learning from each other some of the skills that each individual brings, so that you'll find people who play the guitar get together and they exchange music that they know how to play, or other individuals who know how to sew get together and they cut up leather and cloth, and they teach each other different patterns to make. So there's that. It's a lot about downtime with people that sometimes are from your watch and sometimes that are from others that get together either on the quarterdeck if it's not really busy with maneuvers, or below somewhere to do that. That's the main one.
Wonderful. Thank you for calling in, and it was great to hear from you. Fair winds and following seas as your journey continues.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for being there. And Emil and Bert, thank you for coming aboard for this one. I really appreciate you guys stepping up.
Thank you. All the best to the crew, Mark.
Bye now. Will do, Emil. You know what they're saying. You know what they're saying about you.
No, I don't know. Yeah, I do know.
All right. Bye, gentlemen.
Bye.
Bye.
So we have time for a few more questions before we sign off. There are a lot of questions still waiting, and if we don't get to your question, I apologize. We'll do our best to answer them and put them up on the website for you. It might take us a bit of time if they're related to life on board right now. It is possible for me to contact Mark again, but it takes a while for him to respond because, as you know, the shifts are busy and the rest is very much appreciated when it does come. But we'll go through a few more questions here, and then we look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar on propulsion. A question for Bert. When the ship reaches Yorktown, will it then travel with a fleet of tall ships to visit other ports in the U.S.? What is the plan for this ship after this voyage?
Well, yes, Yorktown is just her first port in the United States, and she will go from Yorktown up the Potomac River to Mount Vernon, which is George Washington's plantation, and then to Alexandria, Virginia, and then on up the Chesapeake Bay to Annapolis, Maryland, and Baltimore, Maryland. She will join a fleet of other tall ships from the United States and from around the world when she gets to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Camden, New Jersey, in the Delaware River. And that's roughly the end of June, June 25 to 28. There's a big tall ships event there that we have organized in honor of Hermione's visit to the United States. And we are looking forward to that. There will be ships there from Portugal, from the Cook Islands, and of course from the United States and Canada, and from France. So it'll be lovely to have that event. From there, she will go to New York City and then on to Greenport, New York, where there's another tall ships event. I forgot to mention, while she's in New York City, there will be a parade of sail with other tall ships from around the New York Harbor area up the Hudson River on the 4th of July. Then she will sail to Greenport, New York for another tall ships festival. Then she will sail to Newport, Rhode Island, and from Newport on to Boston, Massachusetts, and from Boston to Castine, Maine, and from Castine to Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. And when she leaves Lunenburg, she will be bound back for France, across the Atlantic, and homeward bound again. So it's going to be a full summer with lots of events and lots of tall ships from around the world intersecting with the Hermione and selected points along the eastern seaboard of the United States.
Wonderful. So it sounds like, we've had a lot of questions coming in from the New York City area, from Brooklyn, and it sounds like those people that are interested in learning more about the ship would be able to see her in person on that 4th of July parade.
Yes, indeed. And she will be docked, as far as I know, she will be docked at South Street Seaport in Lower Manhattan. And then if they want to follow her over the weekend, they can see her in Greenport, which is on the North Fork at the eastern end of Long Island.
Wonderful. We have time for one more. This relates to the training for swimming. Given that each crew member must be a swimmer, what distance must be swam? And is there is a physical swimming portion to the testing, I imagine? This is from Robert in Michigan.
I said it more like a joke that you have to be able to swim in case you fall in, but we don't have any tests, swimming tests that you have to swim a certain distance or anything. It's just I see it as a good thing. If you're at sea, you should be able to swim.
Okay, so it's more of a, you ask people, can you swim, and they say yes, and you take them on their word.
Yeah, exactly. It's not there's no tests or anything that are done to check if people are able to swim.
Yeah, the issue is not so much swimming a distance as it is being able to keep yourself afloat.
Exactly.
Very true. Well, unfortunately, that has to be our last question to try and keep some semblance of timing for the webinar. This was a very great conversation. I think there was a public school with us there from Brooklyn, ISB, asking questions, which was great. Thank you all for your enthusiastic participation. If your question was not answered, please check back to the cformation.com website, where we will try and post all of them. Bert and Emil, thank you for joining us and taking the time today. It was great to have this conversation with you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here.
If you have not already done so, we invite you to consider joining us on May 19th, when we will be looking at propulsion for this frigate, what made her move then and what's possible today. Come understand with a bit more clarity how sails work. It's easy to register, just follow the link from cformation.com. On behalf of the crew aboard Hermione and the team supporting them in France and the United States, we want to thank you all for joining us. This is Ben Jensen for Marc Jensen aboard the ship. Have a great day, everyone.